We will call this meeting to order. I'm Charlie Gadzik, Chair of the Newcastle Planning Commission, and this is our November 15th meeting. We will begin with a flag salute. Will you all join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Senior Planner Fitzgibbons, I believe it falls to you to call the roll tonight.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Commissioner Marsh.
Here.
Commissioner Quigg.
Here.
Commissioner Dantzler. Here. Commissioner Lowe. Here. Commissioner Vianetta.
Here.
Vice Chair Kennard. Not here. Chair Gatzik.
Here.
All right.
First item is approval of our agenda. Would anybody like to make any changes in the agenda as it was presented? Seeing none, we will consider that approved. Next item is approval of the minutes of our October 25th meeting. Are there any changes, corrections to the minutes of the October 25th meeting? Seeing none, we will consider that approved. That brings us to our first public comment period. We will open that now. We have some people in our audience. Would anyone like to make a comment? Please approach the podium. Who would like to go first?
I think the room is still muted.
What is muted?
Is that Bill?
Yeah, where did that, who made that comment?
You can't hear us now?
Oh, I see. It's,
It says it is on mute.
Yeah, it's on Zoom.
Thank you, Daniel. Can you hear us now, Daniel?
I can hear you very softly.
Maybe now it's better. So
Oh, there, now it is better. Thank you.
Good job, Aaron.
Thank you.
okay.
My name is Philip Schmidt-Patman. I've been a resident from Newcastle for nearly 30 years. And I am also on the board, HOA board in Vineyards. And I started the HOA actually. The builder turned over the paperwork to me about 27 years ago. And we've been paying close attention to the provision, House Bill 1110. And I'm understanding that there's, for example, there's a questionnaire out that have had the chance to review, and a number of other topics here. And I just want to make sure that when this questionnaire is approached, that it's going to speak to the masses, because being on the board for a long time of an HOA and being involved in a lot of political different areas, I know that questionnaires don't often get answered, very small amount of feedback, and especially if a questionnaire is complicated and phrased in ways that people have a hard time with understanding what it means. And I've reviewed this, and I can tell you that in most questions, there are more questions than without, I have more questions about what is this, what is that, what's the detail here, what's the detail there. So I urge you to do a proper review of this. I see it's a third draft right now, I believe, and I urge that there should be some kind of feedback session from other people from the community to give you feedback on these plans that you can incorporate, because I have an MBA in marketing. I've worked my whole life in marketing. I tell you right now, this is not going to go over very well. It's not going to provide a lot of data that you want and what is necessary to have. The other part is what to consider to us, and I didn't see this reflected in here. I don't know if you're aware, but there's a growing legal battle that's building now among HOAs across the state of Washington, and they're growing fast. So what I would suggest in this comprehensive plan update to look at too is to consider if there's a legal battle with HOAs that do not support this because their provisions, their CC&Rs don't allow for something like this, or very clearly stated, it is going to be an ongoing issue for some time, I think, before this settles. And I would design the survey in a way that it focuses on the areas that are currently legal or like they're currently approvable, let's call it that, rather than infringing on HOAs or anything like that. And, you know, the issue is you're looking at safety issues, you're looking at basically the biggest fear of HOAs is that when you start with one thing, it might dissolve the whole HOA. And a lot of people in HOAs that move there, there's a value of their homes that would be devalued. And I don't think that's going to fly. And that's going to cause a big, huge backlash in general, which is currently brewing anyways. So, and that, I mean, people move into HOAs for specific reasons, right? So I would keep that in mind when designing this and when approaching this very, very carefully, very sensible about this topic. And if you have any questions, please ask.
So typically in a public comment period, the protocol is for the commissioners not to respond directly to it. It's not meant to be an interplay. But I would like to make an exception tonight because one of our main items of business tonight is this survey. And if we approve the survey tonight, it will go into production and be distributed probably in December. So, your input on this, I think we would benefit from understanding better as part of this discussion. Now, that's an item that is going to come up in a little bit. I'm not sure, maybe I don't, and we don't have our parliamentary person here, but I think what I would like to propose, and I don't know that there's anybody here who's smarter than me who can tell us we can't do this, but if you are willing to stay until we get to that agenda item, we would call you back up and ask you to just give us a little more detail about what you see as the difficulty of this survey. And then we can respond at that point.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. The item that comes between that topic and now is a discussion about small cells, and we have a consultant who is scheduled to present that. That should be a 15-minute presentation. We're not planning on debating it. We're just being informed about that. And this is a good reminder to our consultant that we do need that to be a concise presentation. So it shouldn't be too much of a time before we'll get back into this.
What are the rules about just swapping something on the agenda? Are we going to get our hands slapped if we swap the agenda items to account for, I don't know how busy they are, but is that a bad thing or just?
That's under item 3 would be agenda approval, and it's already been approved. So
Okay, never
I
mind.
think you'd have to make a motion. But we do have Daniel Kenny, and he's on first in order so that he can
Okay.
have his evening too, so.
All right.
Let's leave it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Would anyone else like to make a comment?
My name is Dee Montfort, and I'm the secretary of the Vineyard HOA. Oh, I thought it was still.
Oh, they turned it on, okay. My name is Dee Mulford, and I'm the secretary of the Vineyard HOA. And I did fill out the 7-page questionnaire out when I was waiting for the meeting to start. It is a little bit confusing for somebody that you don't know what you're talking about. Is this a long-term goal or a short-term goal? So that's another thing you could work on the questioning. And I personally am fine with increasing housing density in the downtown area of Newcastle. But what has to happen first is that the downtown area of Newcastle has to be updated. You can't add people to what it looks like right now and expect it to work. There's not enough parking, for one thing, and it's not safe for anybody to walk down there. Yeah, I've seen near accidents just about 2 weeks ago, right down in the crosswalk there. So that's the main thing, and you'll have to increase population density in areas that are close to public transportation. And I'm fine with adding homes above the retail space. I'm also in approval to update the look of our downtown shops and parking because they look pretty bad. So I think that's the first thing that has to happen. And maybe adding parking garages would be a thing to do underground. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make a comment? Yes, sir.
Evening, folks. My name's Len Troutman. I've lived in the Hazelwood neighborhood for almost 39 years. I normally talk too long, so I'm just going to read this and save you guys a lot of hems and haws. Rather than just go into specifics, I'm just going to blurt out my intention this evening is to encourage the delay of any imminent approval and mailing of the Community Vision Survey. That's kind of what I'm going to talk about without going into a lot of specifics, but I'll try to justify that a little bit. I've reviewed the survey and discussed it with a lot of my neighbors, and I have a few concerns. That survey is a critical link to the public, and it'll influence the city's policies far into the future. And I suspect that the commission budget probably is only going to allow for, one shot at mailing this. I've been following the council, and I've done some mailings recently myself, as you might have received some of them. And they're spendy items, so I understand how that goes. So it's critical that you get this question right, because what the people have to say is paramount in going forward here. One of your commission's objectives in the comprehensive plan, public participation plan, is to inform residents of the comprehensive plan update, the planning, and outcomes. Inform is the key word there. The town hall event that we had back in, I think it was September at Risden, that was a good start, and it was a lot better attended than I feared it would be, but we haven't heard too much since then. Not everybody pays much attention to the city website, so the average citizen doesn't know what's going on. Most of them have never heard of House Bill 1110, middle housing, or many of the other issues that are dealt with in the survey or comp plan. So surveying people about things that they haven't been adequately informed about, it's kind of a fool's errand, and I think it'll just lead to confusing and erroneous data that's not going to help you too much. And regarding the actual survey itself, the format and content might benefit from a little bit of tweaking. I respect Bill and the guys at SJC. They interviewed me, and I like them just fine. However, after reading the vision statement style questions on the survey, I find them to be kind of long and confusing. I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but they're just, you start comparing one option with the other, and you're going back and forth, and so, the response rates on these surveys aren't that great, and having to double back and look at all these things multiple times isn't going to encourage that participation. So the questions are also kind of vague and non-specific, so I don't think they're going to provide the commission with, actionable data. It's kind of like, how do you feel about this? Are you sort of agree? Do you really agree? It's just kind of non-specific data. And the other thing is that in talking to the neighbors, they were reading this thing, and it's kind of like the questions were leading as if they were putting words in people's mouth. And that was kind of off-putting. A major complaint that I've heard from people a lot lately is that by the time they hear about some issue in the city, it's already been introduced, discussed, voted on, and adopted. And sometimes that happens all on the same night. And that leaves the citizens feeling, left out of the loop, and it leaves them angry and apathetic. So to avoid that outrage and the dreaded, hey, nobody told us reaction, I'd like to encourage the commission to delay the rollout of the Community Vision Survey until there's additional public outreach to better inform our people and fine-tune the questionnaire format and content to provide the best possible data. I think that with a small investment of additional time, we can do better and give the citizens a better outcome going forward. I think that, we deserve, the citizens deserve that. Now, Just real quickly, I'm glad that you don't have that clock going. It normally just really, you know, makes me stutter a lot, and I appreciate the little bit of extra time here that you've afforded me. I normally watch you guys online. It's good to see you in real life, and I for one appreciate your efforts, you know, your unsung heroes. Nobody really understands what the Planning Commission does. I've seen what you do, and I see your heroics behind the scene, and I really thank you for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else in the audience like to make a public comment? Is there anyone online that is seeking to make a comment? Okay, we will close the public comment period and move to reports. The chair does not have a report, and Director Hoffman is ill tonight, so he will not have a report. So that's a very quick report period. We'll close that. We don't have a public hearing tonight, so we can move to general business and to our consultant. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for pointing that out.
Nice catch, Scott.
I skipped over commissioner comments. So yes, and let's have raise a hand if you have a comment, and let me call on you. Commissioner Quick.
I am happy with the attendance tonight. This is unprecedented in my time here. It's fabulous to have actually people in those usually empty seats. Not long ago, I got a message saying, "Hey, Quig, did you hear what happened at the city council meeting? Man, it was crazy. You got to watch the video." So I went to watch the video, and I couldn't find the crazy parts, but I did see a mention that there was going to be a survey coming up for the Planning Commission. I said, "Really? I'm on the Planning Commission. That's interesting." So I said, "Hey, when's the survey coming out?" And what I heard was, "Don't worry, it's preliminary, not in a rush. We'll figure it out, you know, when we get to it." Not long ago, in one of our meetings was, "We got to figure this out. November 15th, we're going to approve it in the meeting." And I was visibly dismayed in our last meeting because I think we're rushing through this. And I really think that we as a commission I love what you did there, letting them talk and kind of having the conversation. I think we need to do more of that here. Just kind of talk through our elements, give ourselves a chance to better understand this stuff that I'm reading these books, trying to understand my element, and I'm trying to wrap my brain around it, as well as elements that I haven't even read about. So when I was told we had to approve the survey tonight, I was not happy. And I'm thrilled that people came here and voiced their concerns about this, the survey, and making sure that it's something that people understand, can clearly, make the choices that reflect what they want, and that when we do amend our comprehensive plan and adopt these changes, that we do it in a way that reflects the will of the people, because I think that's why we're here. And I'm just thrilled that you guys are here tonight. So thanks for joining us, and I look forward to getting through the agenda item and getting to you guys again. Thank you, Charlie.
Any other commissioners have a comment?
I just came back from vacation, so I did miss our last meeting. And I got a chance to catch up all the emails, including the agenda tonight. So I just for myself, I felt I'm kind of behind, meaning I didn't really get a lot of chance to review those drafts since I was not here. And I will be, I will say, I do feel I will need some extra time to understand the survey, the design of the survey, the objective of the survey. I also sent an email this morning to, I think, respond to Mark Hoffman's email, but I kind of have more questions in terms of the vision statement and the survey questions around the vision. So just kind of, I guess I put, try to say there's some reason I was behind, but I do need some time to digest. Yeah.
Any other commissioners have a comment? Okay, thank you. Now we will move on to general business and to our consultant, Daniel Kenny, who I haven't met. Hello, Daniel. I see you now. Your face on our screen. Typically, our Community Development Director would introduce you and would say a little bit about this issue, about which the commission really is now only getting its first exposure. So I'm going to ask you to, if it wasn't already part of your prepared remarks, just to give us a little introduction about what it is we're talking about, because I know it's our wireless code, but this is the first time the wireless code has come before us, that in my recollection. So just a little bit of grounding, if you would.
Yes, absolutely. And first, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Daniel Kenny. I'm an attorney at Ogden Murphy Wallace. I've been asked to help on this topic as you start to dive into it, both as the Planning Commission and then council will have their opportunity as well. And the good news is that my presentation is essentially that grounding. And so it's the introduction on what are small wireless facilities, why are we talking about them, and what are some of the parameters that have been put in place for our conversation by the FCC on a federal level, and then where are we headed from here? And so I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint presentation and head through that, and I can say that I can see the writing on the wall for your important topic that follows. So I will not belabor this presentation, but at the same time, of course, if you have questions, let me know. But this is only the very first touch to daylight this. So you will have opportunities to review the code and ask questions further. So with that, I'm going to put onto my screen the PowerPoint. Give me 2 seconds to grab it. And if you can just confirm that you can see the PowerPoint, and I just need to do the presentation mode. Okay. Okay, so I'll get started with small wireless facilities. And again, small wireless facilities is kind of a not so new technology that started back in the kind of 2015, 2016 era, and that kind of caught all cities by a little off guard. And so why are we talking about it? This is just a quick snapshot that I grabbed off of online. And if you look back to kind of that 2013, 14, 15 time frame compared to where we are even beyond the end of this map, the reason that we're talking about this and the reason that small wireless facilities are important is because data consumption on cell phones is just skyrocketing. It's going through the roof because of all of the subscriptions that we have on our phones, the high-end data consumption from videos and from music and things like that. And so all of the cellular companies need to upgrade their systems to allow for more data and faster data. This includes things like smartphones, but then it also includes things like smart cars and smart utility meters and things like that that use the data. And so what we're working with is on the right is a macro cell, just a basic depiction of what a macro cell might be, a tower with an array of antennas on the top of it. That's kind of your old 3G, 4G type installation. What they're looking to do, and have been for a few years now, is to go shorter and smaller. And so an example might be a system on top of a light standard or utility pole that would be much smaller in size, but also have a much smaller radius of effectiveness. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. And so we're just kind of shrinking down everything. And so as a depiction of that, sorry, was there a question?
No.
No.
Daniel,
Great.
we are seeing your,
Yes.
we're seeing your presentation, like the presenter view. I don't know if you want to hit swap
Oh, interesting.
displays or not.
Yes.
There we go.
Thank you so much. I never know which way it goes. I appreciate that. That'll help when I have some more words on the screen in a minute. So the macro sites are things like on the top of buildings, on the top of towers or water towers, lattice structures, things like that. Small cells are down lower. And so the way that I describe this is a macro facility, kind of a 3G, 4G facility. If you hold a flashlight pointed at the ground at your shoulder height, the circle of light that hits the ground from shoulder height is going to be fairly wide and fairly dim. That's kind of the effectiveness of a small or of a macro site. A small cell site is if you hold that same flashlight and you hold it 6 inches off the ground. That circle is going to get much smaller because it hits the ground quicker, and it's going to be much brighter. And so you're going to have a smaller radius of service, but much quicker speeds and faster speeds. And so they're utilizing both of these technologies in their systems, in their networks right now to serve the needs that we have across from our smart devices and whatnot. So this is an intentionally bad picture just to highlight some of the component parts. Don't get scared by this just yet, because I have better pictures to follow. But small wireless facilities have different component parts. If you start at the top of the pole, they have antennas, they have fiber and coax conduit. So there's on a wood pole, it has to be mounted to the side of the pole for pole access, pole workers. But the antenna needs to be fed with the data, right? And there's an equipment box that has radios and fiber termination down towards the bottom of the pole, or in this situation, the middle of the pole. And so you have power coming in, you have a backhaul fiber connection coming in, then it feeds up to that antenna, and it shoots out that data to your cell phones. And so all of these component parts are needed from one of those sites. Now, like I said, some of them look better than this. And so, like, for example, this is a simulation that Verizon provided that would be a new light standard that has integrated into the base of the pole. All of the equipment, the antennas are up at the top, and it would have a dual function where it would also be the light standard as well. And so things can look, much better than that last picture. And then a couple more examples of different ways to accomplish that with shrouding included. These were actual installations in Southern California many years ago. And so, to be totally honest, they've even gotten better than this as well. And sometimes where there isn't a need for a light standard or a utility pole, they can do a small cell only pole that looks like a toothpick. And it honestly, you wouldn't even notice it's there if you didn't look up and see that there was no light standard on it. And so those are some examples of what these installations can look like. And so now I'll pivot, and I am moving quickly, so if there are questions or if I'm going too quickly, just let me know. But this entire topic got spurred on by industry requests for small cells in 2016 that were just objectively unreasonable. They were asking to install new small cell only poles at upwards of 100 feet all over the rights of way of different cities. And that caused a huge alarm because we don't want that in our rights of way. We want to make sure that they're safe and aesthetically pleasing and controlled. And so the FCC issued their declaratory rule and third report and order. Don't worry about the title. It just means that they made rules on how we can handle this technology. And some of those rules dealt with things like fees, shot clocks, and aesthetic requirements. And so they created presumptively reasonable fees on how much we charge for review of these sites. They established incredibly fast shot clocks. So when we start drafting code, which we've started to do already, and we'll talk about a tiny bit tonight, everything that we're doing is going to be within these shot clocks, which are much quicker than permit reviews would be for anything else that's out there. And so we've got some restrictions here, some things that we need to deal with. It's 60 days for a co-location on an existing structure and 90 days for a new structure, which again is very, very fast. But it did allow cities to adopt aesthetic requirements that are reasonable and published in advance. And in fact, this whole order was appealed, and the cities won on that particular topic specifically and got it actually more to the city's benefit. And so you have those adopted. I'm sorry, we have the draft ready for review. And so we have some limitations here in terms of costs and speed and aesthetics that we'll be working into our code. Also working into this are some principles that we need to take into account and make sure that we keep an eye on. First, we can't effectively exclude these providers from the city. And so sometimes when I work with cities, one of the first questions is, well, wonder if we just don't want this. Maybe we don't want small wireless facilities, or there's a part of town where we don't want it. We can't do that. We have been precluded from doing that. This technology has been found by the FCC to be something that belongs in the right of way, and we cannot exclude them. Kind of similar to that, we can't materially inhibit the rollout of this technology, and so we can't do that through things like delays and excessive fees. We can't require 3 public meetings plus a pre-application meeting plus a hearing examiner appeal and just draw it all out. That would be viewed as materially inhibiting. And so again, we're drafting code for you to review that takes all of this into account already. I would envision some questions from this body and from council that will start to touch on some of these. Hey, what about this? What about that? And some of the answers will come back to these. Number 3, we can't dictate or limit the technology choices. So what we won't do is say, you must use this antenna because we feel like aesthetically it's the best one, or you must go in this particular location, because they have network engineers that are telling them exactly where they need to go to operate their systems. Importantly, on number 4, we are not able to regulate radio frequency emissions, RF emissions. The health impacts of RF, it's explicitly says that we are preempted on that. And so we're doing kind of a zoning control, land use control, managing our rights of way. That's our world. Kind of the technology, the health impacts, that's all within the world of the FCC, and they have reviewed that, and they will they have provided parameters for what's 5G or small wireless facilities, what bandwidth they can operate on, and how they operate. And then finally, we cannot discriminate between service providers, which means we give competitive equity. And so when one entity comes in the door and looks to install in your rights of way and gets a franchise or small cell permit, we treat the next people in the door the same way, so that you will have both, competitive equity between those people, but you also end up having equal service between those entities that want to come into your community. And so really quick, let's talk about the code changes that are coming your way. We've got draft code prepared that we will continue to work with Planning Commission and then Council on. And there are a few areas that you'll focus on. First, a telecommunications franchise code. A franchise is an agreement between the city and that provider that grants them the general right of access to your rights of way. And so it is kind of a high level agreement that says you can come into our rights of way and operate your business in a certain way, but it includes things like insurance and indemnification to protect the city. It provides for a process for how the city would get them to relocate if there's a city project that would require their facilities to move. Restoration, if they do work in the right of way, how do they restore the right of way to a proper condition, revocation and termination. So a whole range of things. These are 20 or 30 page documents that will prescribe our relationship with them for that general right of access. That's kind of the first layer. Tangential to that is our eligible facilities requests. Again, this is largely dictated by the FCC, and it covers situations where there's an existing covered facility that they want to expand. And as long as they do not expand that to what is considered a substantial change, they're allowed to do it. That is a type of request that would come in the door that staff would review and either approve or deny based on those FCC standards. And then kind of the meat and potatoes of what we've kind of been talking about are the small wireless facility permits. This is the next layer. Again, we have that franchise that was the high level authority to come into the right of way. A small wireless facility permit would be a site-specific authorization to install a small wireless facility at a particular location. And so they will apply for that. Staff will review that consistent with the standards that we're adopting into the code and then make a decision on those. And so it's a layered approach with the franchise and then the small wireless facility permit. One of the primary considerations for a small wireless facility permit is the design and concealment standards that are also in the draft code that's been provided. And we'll go through that so we understand how it's structured, but it's structured largely as the bullets. There's general requirements for all installations, but then it's based on installation type. And so you have lots of utility poles that are wooden poles, and that can be used in a particular way. So we have design and aesthetic standards that take into account the nature of a wooden pole. And then the same is true for non-wooden poles, buildings, and strand-mounted facilities. And so what we're trying to do is provide bumpers, I guess you could say, on when they come in and they want to install, they got to do their installation within the box that we provide them from a design and aesthetic standpoint, because we don't want them to do just whatever's easiest and cheapest for them. We want them to do what works with the community, what makes sense in your rights of way, and what looks good for the community within the parameters of those provisions that we talked about just a minute ago about what we can and can't do from a technology standpoint and whatnot. And so I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see you all. That was quick. I think that's the quickest I've done that presentation. But again, you will absolutely have opportunities to review that code, the summary of which I just gave you. And in the context of that, we will be solving for what will be coming in the door for lots of applications in theory. We'll see when they actually show up for this new wireless technology in your rights of way. Does anybody have any questions for tonight that I can help answer that might be useful?
Commissioner Marsh?
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I thought that was a great first touch on the issue. I'm curious, in terms of, so obviously with the small site, small cell site, we want to have a greater number of those, right? Because these are line of sight devices, right? So you want to, because they're lower, you're going to have more of them. And I guess I'm curious, could you talk a little bit just about what we should be thinking about as a planning commission as we're thinking about the availability of fiber runs to access what would be candidate sites? Is that something that would have an impact on how we would be thinking about infrastructure here that's available, or the need to add infrastructure potentially to support these types of devices? And just, I mean, I'm assuming that these are all wired for the backhaul, and these aren't site to point. So can you just kind of explain how that works in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. They can be point to point. I have not seen that take any sort of footing, to be honest, though. So most all of them will be connected to a fiber backhaul. Fortunately, most of the companies that do the fiber backhaul or the fiber connections already exist in your communities. I don't know of that exact list for your community, but most of those already have franchises. Again, their right of access to the right of way, and have some facilities. And so they will likely come in for additional permits to connect those sites. Whether those sites are in a location where there already is fiber, or maybe they need to, most of these small wireless facilities are going to be placed in locations where there's a density of people to start, at least. So, kind of your downtown cores, transit hubs, stadiums, places like that, and then it will slowly go out. And so most all of those places already have that fiber. And so I don't think there's anything that you need to worry about that, but I do think that you need to conceptually keep in mind that this is the site. It's going to get connected with both power and fiber. And so those entities will do it as well. But because that infrastructure is all really out there and we're all kind of used to seeing it, really the impact is going to be less seen or observed on that side of things.
Thank you.
Commissioner Van Natta.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just thinking like for the light pole installation, I assume light poles are mostly owned by like Puget Sound Energy, not a city. So I don't know, the company that wants to put in a cell tower would have to work with them, you know, to coordinate the light pole, or how does that work? What's your experience?
Yeah, and so, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Another great question. And so all of these small wireless facility companies, you know, whether it's Verizon or whoever it might be, will have agreements with the pole owners. And so most of them have kind of a master agreement for access to PSE poles, Seattle City Light poles, et cetera, et cetera. And they will then tell them, okay, we want to use this pole and that pole, and they will either add to a wooden pole, maybe with a pole extender, or if there's already space at the top, there's separation requirements from power lines and whatnot. And so they'll do that. The same would be true for light standards. If it is a non-wooden pole light standard, they'll likely have to swap it out, replace it with a pole that would allow for the facilities to be put inside the pole. Most of those were not designed with that in mind originally. And then the same concept or structure would be that, in place if they're city-owned poles. And so the city will have some infrastructure, and I apologize, I don't recall off the top of my head what your infrastructure looks like in terms of owned poles, but you may own some light standards as well. And likely what the city would do is create a master agreement with kind of a site-specific addenda that kind of like the franchise with the small cell permit, it would be the same structure. They'd have a general right of access to that particular set of infrastructure. And then as they needed one or wanted one, they would come in with a site-specific agreement on a particular pole.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I've got another quick question, me again. So thinking of the different criteria, the restrictions that we can't have that would be prejudicial, are we in trouble if we're thinking about mass restrictions on these poles? So I guess what I'm thinking about is if there are prime locations that multiple carriers are interested in, is it considered prejudicial to say, look, there can only be so much mass on a given pole to avoid, you know, bulking these up through co-location, having, you know, multiple array upon these?
Yeah, so I mean, the reality is what I've been told by industry and just from the pole design capabilities is it's going to be one per pole. And so because we're talking about these smaller poles, they all have to have their antennas in the same location, and then their equipment can conflict with each other. And so we likely will not run into that issue, which would absolutely be an issue. The poles would not be able to accommodate the load for multiple co-locations. But because of the technology and the load, it'll be one per pole, which begs a similar question. If there's 3 or more entities operating cellular networks in your area, and they can't be on the same pole, but they all want to serve the same areas, that means that they potentially could all want to get on poles. It would be first come, first serve. If we own the poles, I think the same is true for PSE. Whoever wants the pole and puts their name on it and pays for it, they get it. But what that means is, you know, you're not going to see one of these per block because of the radius. You may see multiple per block depending on their network needs, which is one of those things that we don't really get into.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody have their questions out? Great, then we will move on. Thank you very much, Daniel, it was very informative.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's talk about the comprehensive plan and the survey. And for the benefit of both the commissioners and our folks in the audience, let me paint the big picture for you. This revision of the comprehensive plan is a long process. It's happening over 2 years, but there is a deadline. The deadline is the end of 2024. we haven't got into the part of the process yet of actually recommending any changes to the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is a vision document. It is not the city ordinance that really is where the rubber hits the road. It is, it sets out a 30,000-foot vision of where the city wants to go. And from that comes the ordinances that are passed later and given much more attention about how that's actually interpreted. So, but we need to do this update to the comprehensive plan. We need to make sure that the comprehensive plan is aligned with what the current residents of Newcastle want for their city. Last time we did this was, had a comprehensive review was 8 or 9 years ago. And the city has changed a lot since then. We've got a lot of new people since then. So maybe they feel the same way as those people did back then, maybe they don't, which is the reason why this survey is important. The survey is not intended to get very specific guidance on law, but it is an opportunity to get some broad direction on law, and I'll come back to that in a minute. In order for us to complete our work and meet our deadline by the end of 2024, we need to devote a lot of time to talking about what changes we recommend. We haven't gotten to that point yet because we've been listening and we've been studying. This survey was going to mark the entry into the discussion period where we start talking about the changes that we as commissioners, now that we've listened and studied, think ought to be made to that plan. And there are also some dates that we have to meet, and I don't know those dates, but there is a SEPA review that has to be done. And by the way, do we have our SCJ consultant with us? Is Aaron with us? So Aaron, let me give you permission to jump in if you have something to add or to correct what I've said or to add a point where my knowledge is limited. For example, on the SEPA review, there is a date that we have to submit something for SEPA review in order to meet our deadline. And we were hoping to conclude our conversations about each element of the comprehensive plan. An element is like housing, another element is parks, trails and recreation, another element is transportation. So we wanted to complete our conversations about that, make recommendations, and do that in a way that is lets us meet the timetable for whatever is required for the SEPA review. My understanding is that those conversations would have to be concluded around April. So now I'm going to ask Aaron if that jives with what you know about when we would need to be, when the commission would need to be making recommendations about changes to the plan.
Well, thank you. That's a very good overview. I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. And I'm just kind of reviewing the schedule that Bill put together for the overall public participation plan. And yes, we are a year out from any kind of formal recommendation of adoption by this body. And there is the mandatory 60-day review by the Department of Commerce. And the SEPA review, we're not quite at the point where we know whether an EIS will be triggered or not. We're really at the visioning stage and sort of, transitioning into some, big questions about how, growth may occur over the long term. And that's to 2045. This is a 20-year long-range vision for the city. And the survey is intended to really sort of vet some of the existing visions in existing planning documents, and it's also influenced by some of the things we've already heard and some of the work and the input that we've heard from this body. But it also it goes a little bit farther in asking some of those big questions. There's been a lot of changes, certainly in the community, but there's been a lot of changes at the state level too, with regards to meeting mandated housing targets, and as I think was previously mentioned, House Bill 1110, which the city is subject to. And so some of these questions are intended to kind of, get the community's input on how, what's the best, to lead into scenarios for accommodating, growth in the community, vetting and ensuring that we understand the values and aspirations of the community, and while at the same time meeting the requirements by the state. Many of them pretty new requirements, and a lot of cities are certainly struggling with how to go about doing that. So yes, I think generally that's everything you said is absolutely on target. Did I miss anything that you want me to touch on, just with regards to the overall process?
Yes, when do we, as a commission, need to have our recommendations about changes to the plan? That doesn't mean that that it's a document ready to go to the city council, but
Right.
the point at which we say these are the things that should be incorporated into the new plan.
So we'll be working, so we're targeted to have like a draft plan presentation and a series of meetings with you in July and August of next year, with a final presentation slated for September, and then a formal recommendation in October.
So if you're going to be giving us a draft plan in July, when do you need to have our recommendations that you need to incorporate into that draft plan?
That we have slated for July and August of 2024.
That's when we give you our recommendations, or when you give us the draft plan?
We'll be working with the commission on refining the plan at that point. And your formal recommendation will be to the city council.
Right. What I want to know is when you need to know the things that we want changed in the plan, so you can incorporate them into the things that you know legally have to be changed, and come back to us with a document that we can review. So I'm sensing that it's sooner than July or August, but am I correct on that?
Looking at the public participation plan schedule that I have, a more detailed one than just that basic one, that's slated, for and this is a tentative timeline, right? The idea is that the planning commission would be engaged throughout, and as policy recommendations come up and as key issues come up, those will all be, digested and incorporated into the policy recommendations that we'll be putting forward.
Okay, well,
So
I'm not hearing a date there, so, and the reason I'm going into this with such detail is because I'm trying to determine how soon we need these survey results and how much time we have
Right.
to work with the survey in order to meet our other commitments. So, for example, if we are able to come to agreement on a survey by December 20th, I feel pretty sure that we could make, that time will be soon enough. We might have our survey results a month later, but we probably can make our commitment. But I don't know when you need to have those recommendations from us about what needs to be incorporated in the plan. And that's what I was trying to get a sense of from you.
So that's going to be an ongoing process all the way from essentially from now until, through July and August of next year.
So what I envision then, let's assume that we agree on a survey in December, and we get survey results in February, and then in February, let's say March, April, May, at a minimum, we are devoting those 3 meetings to conversations about the changes that we were going to recommend in the plan. The commissioners will be giving their individual recommendations. The commission will discuss those. So if that's the timeline that I would think we would need in order for us to really dig into the elements after we get the survey results. Does that seem like you can accommodate that schedule, or that the overall process?
Yes, I think so. And I think, I want to make it clear, though, that the survey will not be the first and last, option for the community to be involved. What we envision going forward, following the survey results, is to hold a workshop, or maybe a series of workshops, to really look at scenarios for growth based on the survey results, and really refining those options, those scenario options with the community, to then, ultimately to land on a preferred scenario that that we will work with you on, and you will work with community members on, that ultimately will be recommended to the council for adoption. So following that, following the survey, we're hoping to kind of go into kind of 3 options for growth scenarios based on everything we've heard and all the data we've collected, and really come back to the community and workshops to ask various questions about those scenarios and what the trade-offs are and what the consequences may or may not be.
So I'm glad you pointed out the workshops, because it is important for especially for the people who joined us tonight to know that the survey is not the last word. It is really the first word, and it's meant to be a very high-level initial sensing of people's sentiment about things. So, and of those things, there's like 6 different topics there, ranging from parks and trails to transportation, to a couple that are much more potentially controversial, one of them being housing, probably the main one being housing, the second one perhaps being the downtown and the redevelopment of the downtown. So the survey is not meant to get at what people exactly want for those things. The survey is meant to start the conversation. The survey does not assume that people are going to be informed ahead of time. The survey, in fact, is a way to provoke people to inform themselves, because this is an opportunity for us to get into everybody's homes with a postcard that hopefully will intrigue them to go to the survey. And when they get to that survey, they will be as interested in it as the people in our audience tonight are interested in it. And they will then be watching for these other workshops where they can really dig into this and give more concrete and specific feedback that would eventually influence the city council in passing an ordinance that will determine what can be built in a single-family neighborhood, for example. So what is really important for us for this survey to be at this stage is that it is really understandable, that people aren't confused by the language, and so it's clear to them, but it's not meant to really elicit a specific policy response for them. Although some of the questions in this draft survey do get pretty specific, because we know some of the parameters, like the downtown plan. We know that allows for mixed use, and we know that what we have does not allow for mixed use. And those are really the 2 things that people have talked about, that we've heard in conversations, that perhaps you've heard, that there are people who would like to preserve the old Newcastle and leave the downtown the way it is. And there are people who think, let's have more restaurants, let's have more shops, let's put housing down there so we can keep it away from the neighborhoods. And this survey is meant to get some general feel for where people are on that spectrum. So I just hope you keep that in mind as you think about what we're trying to achieve with that. So with that, I will recognize Vice Chair Kennard.
Just to confirm, when you say workshop, this is not just staff and planning commission. This also involves the public in a very real way, so that we are definitely going to be speaking to the public.
Yes, sir. It principally involves the public. It may be hosted by the commission, hosted by staff, but the idea is for the public to come in and work on and really consider these scenarios. And the way we envision it now, and this was something that we thought maybe we could start planning for in December. Maybe there's a little bit more survey work, and maybe we can touch on, what the next phase looks like. It's totally okay with us to delay this and get it right, the survey that is. But yes, no, the idea is to bring the public in, have small group discussions, and really kind of vet these different scenarios and hopefully get a direction going forward.
Other commissioners?
So I guess I would add that, we are dropping into the middle of the process a little bit here with this survey, because we, as a commission, we made a commitment. We were involved with a fair amount of public outreach over this last year, being present at community events, specifically to engage folks that live in Newcastle and work in Newcastle to talk to us about these issues that are here. So this is part of a process. And frankly, I'll say we've had hundreds of conversations with folks already about these things. I guess I like the idea of keeping in mind as we talk about this process, talk about the survey, talk about workshops, how do we continue to expand the number of people that we're having those conversations with? And, I think we need to keep that front and center in our thinking, that there are a lot of people we've talked with, we put a lot of energy into that, but there are more people that we're hoping to reach here that go beyond those folks that were just at those events. So that's my one comment.
Yes, Commissioner Dassler.
Yeah, I have a lot of ideas swirling, but and I'm really torn on this survey, because on one hand, I don't need to hold my button. I want to respect, the process that's outlined. This is, the consultant who's working with us on this. And I think when we were first introduced to the survey, even the style of it, the vision statement style, I think it took us some time to even get our heads around that's what it's about. And I know, Jim, you talked a lot last month about how you really wanted choices. And I think we sort of pulled that into that second draft that we're looking at now. But I think that's maybe watered down the original intent. I think that if we're going to proceed with this style survey in the next month, I think we need to commit to that style, like really accept that these are just vision statements and they're not getting into scenarios yet. They're not getting into real policy. It was sort of tempting to go there because that's where our heads are at. We're ready to go. We're jumping in the details. We've talked to so many people. But I guess, that's where what I'm thinking now is if we are going to go with this vision statement style survey, sort of go back to that first draft maybe even and see. I think they were really pulled from the last comp plan with a few tweaks, but not a lot. And I think I hear what you're saying about the changes that were made to the downtown plan one and the housing. Those are the two most important ones. So maybe take a closer look at maybe those. But I think we still have hard work ahead of us over the next few weeks to, maybe not have the three different scenarios, just have one vision statement for each of our elements. And of course, that's the whole point. People can tell us if they like it or not. But to maybe not go into so many scenarios in the survey, and I'm hearing the consultant say that that's sort of the next step is to flesh out scenarios, and then that's what people will look at in the workshops and additional feedback.
Thank you. Commissioners, anybody else? Commissioner Marsh?
I guess I have a question spurred by that. So something that would be helpful for me, Aaron, over the last month or series of weeks, I've been looking at these questions and thinking about these questions and having conversations with people about these questions, trying to probe this. And I'm really trying to understand what actionable data we can get from this. And I have in my mind what I would expect actionable data to look like. And I'm not sure I don't think that necessarily is going to come from this. I'm skeptical of that because of the way that these statements are drafted and the extent to which I think they rely heavily on people's filling in the text box. But I'm wondering if that is somewhat shaped by my expectation of what that should look like in terms of actionable information and what that next step, what that output would be. Can you help me understand? Can you describe with some specificity, looking at a vision statement like this, getting a series of responses from a survey like what we are considering here, what would be an example of the type of actionable information or something that's going to propel us to the next step based on your experience? Can give us this, an example. Give me an example, I guess. Not speak for my colleagues here, but Does that make sense? Where I'm going with that is really just to try and understand what do we have when we're done with this based on what we've got in front of us.
Sure, very good. If I may, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
Well, first of all, this might be a good segue to kind of go into the comments we received from Maggie, I believe it was, who sent in some pretty thoughtful comments regarding visioning versus policy direction. And so we've already kind of Bill and I kind of sat down and kind of restructured the survey a little bit based on that input. And so we didn't really change a lot of the questions. There are a couple of tweaks here and there, but we kind of structured it such that, essentially the first section is, okay, these vision statements, how much do they still make sense today to the average Newcastle resident? And those are kind of the overarching, future states, for 20 years out. And we took some of that from the comp plan. We took some of it from, previous engagement efforts. And we really want to vet and say, okay, does this still make sense? But then the other section really targets the big questions. And that kind of drives us a little bit more towards a policy question. We're not calling them vision statements in this kind of revised draft that I wanted to show to you. We're really calling them options. Here's one option for downtown, two options, very distinct. Here's 3 options to address housing, with some also educational components. And that's been also a key part of the survey, is to kind of bring people up to speed about what a comp plan is, what are the constraints we're under, what are the housing targets that the city's supposed to meet, and how might we do that? So those are starting to get into the big questions about future directions. And so the data that we're hoping to get from this is, okay, a general preference of how to accommodate, growth. Is it more downtown? Is it more spread out through the neighborhoods? What are constraints going into that? I think we heard earlier about, some of the constraints with some existing CCNRs. And those, our understanding is those CCNRs are one of those constraints that we're starting to look at, already. Because my understanding of House Bill 1110 is that it cannot supersede existing CCRs that are in place. Those have to be respected. So we have to accommodate, so this vision, so the data we get from this will kind of give us general preferences, and we'll take that and apply it and see how it works into these scenarios where it can, where it's legally able to, and where the community preferences direct us to do so. So this kind of tees us up for the more detailed work of the different growth scenarios that the city is to accommodate. Does that answer your question?
Well, to a degree. I mean, I guess, and maybe even being more in the weeds on this. So picking as an example, like the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails vision, the statement we have here. City parks are well-connected, well-maintained, safe, and accessible. They accommodate a variety of uses, such as picnicking, playgrounds, and team sports. Okay, that makes sense. Residents can connect to Newcastle's recreational and commercial areas through an extensive network of safe and comfortable trails and pathways. Environmentally critical areas continue to be protected from development, and city policies strive to preserve open space. I think, there are a number of things in there. A number of topics are folded into that, and I understand that this is intended to be more than one issue, right? I guess my question is, you're going to get a distribution across these 5 categories. Strongly disagree, this strongly agree. Looking at a statement like this, help me understand when you have a distribution in response to something like this, how do you interpret that? Exactly. Are you looking at that and saying, okay, if people are 60% disagree with this, what does that mean? And where do we go from there? Does that drive more specific discussions around, a variety of topics in workshops? Is it, I mean, how do you apply that response to something then we can do something with? You know what I mean?
Right. So if for example, we got 60% of folks who responded strongly disagree with that statement. It says we have more work to do with regards to parks, recreation, open space, and trails. And that would, spur us to really delve into some further engagement and efforts around that particular element of the plan.
Vice Chair Kennard.
Yeah, I think what we do with those statements, the response, is the policy. Right now, the policy says that for so many thousands of our citizens, we'll have so many acres. It's a ratio of acres of parks and miles of trails. But that might not be the right level of service. Other communities say there should be a park within a third of a mile or something like that. So those would be the policies that might come out of the parks and trails segment of the plan.
Well,
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I have a question, comment, kind of, I guess, follow what Scott asked about what are we going to do with the survey results. I think, Aaron, I heard you saying the survey is going to have some change, and I think you're saying there will be vision statement and then there will be options. So my question, I think that kind of, I guess, probably incorporated my comment in terms of vision versus policy declaration choices. I guess my question also go back to what are we going to do with the survey results we get back regarding those options? So for example, I think the survey, like the housing has like 3 visions. I guess it will turn to be 3 options. Is that what's okay? So for 3 options, if the survey results saying 35% is voting number 1, or 30, kind of evenly spread. So what are we doing in that kind of scenario?
So, and that's what it actually is going to inform is the scenarios that we come back with to present that will be more specified. Here are 3 different scenarios for meeting those housing targets. One may be, more housing types within neighborhoods. One may be more intensity of development downtown. And so this survey is going to help inform those ultimate scenarios that we bring back to the community in workshop format.
Will it really? That's what I'm getting at. That's the reason I was so opposed to the survey from the get-go. Why I was, pretty insistent in our last meeting, Aaron, that we not publish, tonight the idea is to approve publication of the survey. And I think we're putting the cart before the horse, way before the horse. I'd like to talk with all you about the elements, better understand what you've read about your elements, the comprehensive plan, and then kind of have, figure out what is the gaps in our information and what do we need to go to the public and fill in those gaps. Like what are the choices, the hard choices? With, like, for example, within my element housing, there's a range we're no longer gonna be allowed to have single family, traditional Newcastle-y residences, right? You have to allow at least duplexes in that. However, that's the minimum. We're a tier 3 city. You could have triplexes, you could have quadplexes, you could have more, right? There's all this variety within that. We're on setbacks. Do we want to go 0 lot? Do we want to keep them the way they are? With regard to parking, what do we want to do around parking? Do you want to just say, hey, parking's inhabits multiplex housing, so we got to get rid of the parking rules, around the. So what I want to read, Aaron, briefly as possible, is what I've got in front of me. And imagine I am a citizen who hasn't spent the past year studying housing and middle housing, and your average person who may or may not have English as a first language. Reading this, bear with me, this will take about 2 minutes. Provided this is the entire thing they're going to be chosen with just one section that to me is the most important critical part of this entire, instead of asking them a simple question, this is what they're posed with. Providing a full range of affordable, accessible, healthy, and safe housing choices to every resident is a key goal for all of King County, and Washington's Growth Management Act requires Newcastle to plan for an additional 1,480 housing units by 2045 to help meet it. Recently enacted state law also requires the city to allow more variety of housing types, duplexes, indoor, middle housing types, in areas traditionally dedicated to single-family detached houses. Following are three contrasting visions for how Newcastle can meet demand for additional housing and comply with state requirements. Housing Vision 1, most potential for increasing housing supply. Newcastle's efforts are spread citywide, accommodating more homes in two ways. One, consistent with current downtown plan, multifamily housing, i.e. apartments or condos, above retail businesses is allowed and encouraged. Smaller scale, medium density housing options, up to fourplexes and accessory dwelling units, are also allowed within single-family neighborhoods, provided that they are no larger than a single-family home is permitted to be. Number two, as envisioned Statement 1, Newcastle allows and encourages.
Commissioner Quizan, I think we get your point.
No,
I think we
you
get
don't
your
get my point, because what I'm saying is, the second one is, it references back. So you have to go back in order to understand option 2, what option 1 was. So it says, as in Vision 1, Newcastle allows and encourages multifamily. And then Vision 3 is essentially the same language as all these big words. There's no way on God's green earth that your average run-of-the-mill person who's trying to transit their kids between school, who's trying to do their job, who has no time to take a survey, who may or may not take the time to click the QR code on this postcard and go into that survey, is going to understand the choice they're making, much less the references it makes to all these other things. And I think that's what we're hearing up here, and I'd love to hear their comments on that. I don't think the survey is baked and ready to go. I think it's going to be confusing. I don't think it gives people clear choices that will help us, give us actionable data to say, okay, people would really prefer to keep the multi-unit housing around the core like we had in the last comp plan, or, you know what, this community has changed its approach, and the new comp plan should be more accommodating to more density in the residential areas, and we should revise our parking and setback requirements to accommodate those changes. I think that's the clear choice, the most important choice we're making in this comprehensive plan amendment, and I want to make it so that anybody that takes this survey understands that very simple choice.
So I want to make a proposal, and then we can go back to conversation, but I propose that we do not, that this survey is not cooked the way it is. It needs more work. I propose that we work on it between now and our next meeting. I propose that we include some members of the public, and perhaps the people in our audience here would be among those willing to meet and look at a survey that we attempt to make simpler and more understandable. So you don't have to answer that yet. It's not a vote yet, but think about that. And I will go to Commissioner Van Atta.
Where do I start? A couple things. I think we were almost better off with the first survey, the more I think about this. Because to me, now that I've thought about this more, the vision, this survey serves a couple of purposes. One is this will be our one and only chance people will get something in their mailbox, right? That's huge.
Yep.
Right? And I don't think you want to ask them what the setbacks for the lot line should be. Like, that's too detailed, that's too in the weeds, it's just going to come out of nowhere.
And we're not asking them that in this survey.
Right. I know we're not, but, that was an extreme example. But even some of these questions on, like downtown plan questions are even like kind of coming out of nowhere, because we have a downtown plan. Like, are we saying that we can disregard the downtown plan and they can pick the option not to do that downtown plan? That's the thing, I don't know. To me, what I want to get out of this is I want to generally have everybody in Newcastle know that we're doing this process. And they're all generally in the same direction. Like, they want parks and trails, they want a downtown that's more dense, whatever that might be. And then, once we kind of have that, everybody kind of on board, it's those workshops that were mentioned. That's where we start really getting into the weeds of, like, what does a duplex in Hazelwood look like? Yes. Because that's where you're going to get, people involved and we can have
How
these
many people go to
conversations
those,
about-
how many people go to those meetings?
I just don't think you're gonna get that answer off a survey. It's too complicated.
But nobody goes to those meetings.
Well, and that was my other point, is can we create a calendar so that when we send this, the postcard out or whatever it's gonna be, take our survey, first workshop's January 15th, next workshop's February 15th, because that's great advertisement in your mailbox.
Okay,
If we can-
commissioners,
if you're
commissioners,
assuming people can't go
excuse
to
me,
them.
Commissioner Quigg, we're going to move to a little more formal arrangement here, just to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk. And so, don't speak until you're recognized, and Commissioner Dantzler was, I'm sorry, yes, Commissioner Dantzler had her hand up. You'll all get a chance to speak.
I like the idea of going back to a more simple survey. I would like to propose that some of the good information that we stuck in this version is pulled out to like a one-pager on here are the top issues and the status of the housing law. And, because some people will go to a website and click on that and read it, and it's good information. If I get a survey, I kind of do want to read a little bit more information so I can form my opinion before responding. So to have that as an option, I think would be really nice.
Commissioner Lowe.
Yeah, I also like the idea to design a simpler, easy to understand survey. And I also have a suggestion, maybe in the survey, in the introduction part, give a little bit of summary or overview, what are we going to do with the survey. That way will motivate people to participate in the survey, and also I think it will drive the actionable results, and we also can understand how to use the survey results.
Commissioner Quigg, would you like to complete your comment?
I love the last two comments.
Commissioner Marsh.
I agree with Maggie in terms of specifically to the extent that we can have a statement up front that explains what we're looking to get out of this. I think it forces us to articulate how this bridges to the next step. That was the point of my earlier question is I don't have clarity in terms of seeing how this gets us there based on what we've got in front of us. And if we commit to making that kind of a statement as part of what we send out, it forces us to be clear about that and have consensus.
Vice Chair Kennard.
I agree with this simplicity idea. I like your suggestion that we, for instance, on the 3 different scenarios for housing, condense that down to one, reflected of the current downtown plan and state law, which says that we have to expand it, and ask people how they feel about that, as one suggestion. I got several comments from folks that when they read this, that it seemed to indicate that this was existing scenarios. This is what exists, like in the parks. So they suggested in the future that be a lead-in, or in 2045 or whatever the date is. So it's real clear that it's not a statement of what exists today, but what should be in the future.
Commissioner Dantzler.
To add to the simplicity, I propose that we only have one statement per element, because we can, easily describe this is why we're doing it, because that's how our comp plan is structured. I also can see adding the downtown one, but explaining why. It's because we have a downtown plan. And then lastly, I would propose deleting out the overall one. We start with that one, and it's pretty beefy, and it's, I think, a lot for people to ask people to get their head around all 7 elements plus a downtown plan, and then what do you think? We might want to save that to the end, or just delete it from it, because I think that'll be formed through our work over the next months. I don't think the 7 of us might come up with a compelling overall statement in the next 3 weeks.
Okay, at this point, I would like to invite those of you in the audience, if you would like, well, before I do that, let me get a word from Senior Planner Fitzgibbons.
I just wanted to make one quick clarification on something that was said, because this is a public forum and we really haven't talked about House Bill 1110 yet. It's not that we are requiring people to build duplexes, it's that we will no longer be allowed to forbid people from building them unless with exception, of course, as always is. But I did want to make that clarification that people can still build single-family homes before that gets out. So anyway, thank you.
Okay. Would anyone from our audience like to make a comment now? If you would, go ahead and approach the podium. And you know what, I'm going to, I don't know if we need to do this formally, but I believe we have another public comment period. I'm going to ask someone to make a motion that we adjust the agenda and move that to this point.
I move that we move the public comment part of the agenda to right now.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moved. Yes, sir. Would you tell us your name again? I know you gave it the first time, but I didn't write it down.
Don't worry. My name is Philip Schmidt Potman. It's hyphenated in the end. Don't worry. If you ever need to, I'm sure Jim can give it to you, or I'm gladly. No, don't worry about that. I like the discussion where this is heading right now. I appreciate this. I would say, Commissioner Scott Morash, you were spot on with the questions that you asked, because this is exactly the same questions that I've been asking. And I like the direction this is going. In a survey, I would suggest going with the explanation and the background, why it's been asked, so people can read it and it's clearly defined, and then give them options on the different areas, how they look like, what's important to them, what they want to see in it, which gives you then the feedback to work with that. And, I think that is much more productive. And you're going to get some information, some feedback that's going to help you the direction. And Commissioner Manetta, you want to go and work with the public, and I was involved in 95, 96, 97, so probably 2000 in the discussions. The turnout was between 5 and, when we were lucky, 15 people maybe that showed up. And there were always visions made, and I saw them reflected in years later, and I always heard that the groups really didn't increase by that much. And I think what is important is that the public understands that their participation is important. The survey gives them the opportunity to participate already now and give you kind of an idea. And I would then say reach out to community leaders or people that, like within the schools that are more known, and reach out and say, we really need people to participate here. Can you reach out to groups so that we want to make a point here with the city, and we need your help, something in that direction. But I'll gladly be available if you guys want, if you're interested, and help with that. But I appreciate you guys spending your time on this too, because being a commissioner is not always a very thankful job. So, thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Aaron, do you have the postcard cover invitational thing available, or do you don't have it? Darn it, okay. Because what he said reminded me of your attempt to make sure that people actually click on the invitation to take the survey. So.
Would anyone else like to comment from the audience?
Sorry, I wasn't on the mic, so no, I don't have that now, but I'd be happy to go back to my desk and forward it to Planning Commission so that you have it, because we're continuing this conversation into the next month anyway, so we have some time.
Mr. Troutman, you have the floor.
Commissioners, in general, just thank you. I'm used to working with the city council, where I go in and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt what the outcome of my conversation is going to be before the vote's taken. It's a foregone conclusion. I kind of expected that tonight. I just figured that you guys were going to just run ramshackle, and you were going to vote, and the check was going to be in the mail. It was going to be a rubber stamp type of a deal. And you guys slowed down, and you looked at things analytically, it looks like, you're in the process of, taking things into consideration, and I'm very pleasantly surprised. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Appreciate your time again. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Mr. Clark.
Good evening, thank you. Feels weird to be on over here. Great discussion. I'd like to reflect on a little bit of comments I hear from the public on occasion. People will say to me, and I think it's a widely held belief, people believe, why do we have to have any growth? Like, why are they building that, and why are they building that? I think there's a disconnect. People don't understand, well, that's private property, they can build on that private property, like the Heemstra. Why are we building that? It was a nice pony farm. Well, that's private property, they have, a right to do that. And I think, so I recently got another email, and I went through a dissertation for the lady explaining to her why, what is the Growth Management Act? And what is the House Bill, 1110, or what the number is? And people, I think, in the community are disconnected from an understanding, a basic understanding of what it means for growth in our community. There's people, probably a big portion, but we don't want any growth. Why is the council, why are they allowing that? And I think maybe in your survey, just a suggestion, but maybe at the beginning, preface it with, here are some state requirements that we are trying to meet or we have to meet. In other words, we can't just have zero growth. We have to, these are the basic outlines that drive this process. Because I do think there's a misunderstanding in general in the community about what does it mean for growth. So some of the questions you have, assuming you kept the same questions, you might get a lot of skewed responses because a person's initial reaction was, I don't want any growth. This stinks. I'm going to vote no on everything, because their basic understanding of what it means, like, it is not tracking. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So just a suggestion, just from listening to your great conversation, is there might need to be a little more preface to the survey or public engagement to let people know what it really means, why, where the city has to go. We don't have a choice, in a way. So, thought I'd bring that up.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
No. I'll tell you why after. Dee, how about you? Have you anything more you want to say? Okay, thank you. So, sorry, Commissioner Marsh. I actually read a primer on how to do public comment, and I'm going to ignore that, what it told me. But what it told me is this isn't supposed to be an interplay. The public's supposed to comment, we're supposed to listen, and we're not supposed to engage in it. However,
This time has been a bit interplay all evening.
yes, I know. So, but I couldn't resist telling you no. So, what is your comment?
It actually is a comment I was thinking about making earlier, and I think the point that Councilmember Clark made about the legal requirements, I really want to say that that's important, not just because people need that information, but I have a concern if we aren't extremely clear about these are things that are mandates versus these are things where you can provide us your input. We're going to have a lot of people that have an expectation that things that are mandated are things that they can actually change. And whether it's traffic on Coal Creek or whether it's House Bill 1110 or whatever it might be, we really have to be careful about that, because if there's, in my mind, one way that this can backfire in terms of trying to get public input on this, it's to create this false sense that there are things that can be changed that we just don't have control over. So I really appreciated that comment, and I had been thinking it was important to say that as well.
I'm going to close the public comment period, by the way, and now we'll go to Commissioner Quigg.
Well, and I just want, what he said I agree with, like the part about in the survey where it talks about like traffic on Coal Creek and how we talk about to the extent we can to help with traffic, how much really can we affect the traffic on Coal Creek? I don't know if we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure by saying that we're gonna, I just feel like, I think Scott's hit the nail on the head. To the extent this survey can let people know, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, like Aaron said, or here's what's mandated, and here's your choices within that. I think that'll, and like council members said, to the extent we can say, this is kind of, this is the way the world is, so folks, here's your choices within the way the world is. I think that would be fantastic. So I've really enjoyed, this has been the most vigorous conversation we've had in any meeting yet, and I think it's because we have people in the audience. So thank you for participating, everybody.
Okay, yes.
I just have a question on that. Just something to think about is if you're going to try to keep something simple and digestible, I mean, really, the shorter the survey, the better, right, for everybody's schedule. So like I can go in and I can just push buttons and I'm happy. How do you, I mean, I'm just thinking about all the things that we can and can't do, and there's areas of gray. How, and you don't have to answer this now, but just how do you do that? How do you make things digestible for people at the same time that you're getting these, just their feel about how they would like Newcastle to go in the future?
Yes, Commissioner Quick.
Aaron, I have a question for you. Did you see the survey I sent with my little choices? I'm responding to you, Planner Fitzgibbon's question with the question to you. Can you, I don't know, can we hear you, Aaron? Did you see the survey I wrote, Aaron? Aaron on the Zoom call with the green shirt, staring at the screen.
I don't believe I did.
Are there any other Aarons in the room? I'm sorry, Aaron on the screen, I'm pointing at you. Did you read the survey that I wrote, sir? Just say no or
No,
yes.
I don't
Okay,
think
that's
I
fine.
don't think that was forwarded to
That's
me.
fine.
Aaron Fitzgibbons, did I miss something?
I don't know if you saw it. That's okay. I'll summarize it briefly, and I'm going to repeat what I said in last month's meeting. My wife and I are always trying to get along well. We want to be married forever and ever, die in each other's arms one day. There's this book called Love Languages. I took the Ding Dang test. It was a simple test that says, would you rather have a hug or would you rather have somebody mow the lawn for you? And I'm not saying it needs to be that simple, but I tried my best, Planner Fitzgibbons, to craft a planning commission comprehensive plan survey that kind of gave people choices like that. I did a crappy job, admittedly, but I think it would be great if we could help people understand the clear choices that are in front of them and not give them an illusion that they can, like you said, stop growth. We're going to grow. Not only are people have the right to grow, but also we're mandated to allow for growth. So within the confines of those choices, how can we give people the opportunity to feel like they have some say in what the city's going to look like over the next decade?
Thank you. I do recall your conversation about that, and I am familiar with the love language survey, so thank you for that reminder.
Okay, we're going to take a question from
So
Commissioner
yes,
Dantzler.
I think I have some clear direction. I tried.
Well, I don't think you do yet. So hold on a second, Aaron. Let me get a question from Commissioner Dantzler, and then let's turn to you and talk about next steps. Commissioner Dantzler.
Okay.
I feel like that's the opposite direction that we were going earlier. I think we have to decide, are we going to use a vision statement approach to this survey and keep it simple, let people react to each of them, or are we going to give people choices? I think if we give people choices, we're going to be here till April crafting these questions. It's not as simple as, do you want A or B?
Yes, go ahead.
So I think that's a great point, Amy. And what Scott said earlier was, if somebody does check a box, what does that mean to us? And so if we give a vision of Newcastle provides for blah, 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 and somebody says, I agree, that's easy. If somebody says, I don't agree, then the real work comes into play. Like, okay, if they don't like this, what's the next step? So I just want to make sure, like Scott said, if somebody answers, no, I'm not excited with this vision, like where do we pivot from that? Like if I say, do you like pizza? And you say, no, I still don't know what the hell to cook for dinner tonight, right? So how do we handle this vision statement thing in a way that actually guides us to the next step like Scott was suggesting?
All right. Aaron in the green shirt, tell us what you take from this and what you think is a good way to proceed.
Well, in the last iteration of the survey, we've tried to kind of accommodate all the feedback we've hearing. There's a kind of a saying in my line of work, once you've appeased, when, at the end of the day, if no one's happy, you've done your job because you've appeased everybody, right? But, so we broke it up into like, okay, here's our vision statements. You know, are we off track? Are we on track? Has things changed since the last comp plan? We want to kind of affirm that we still have, you know, a vision going forward to inform goals, policies, and actions that will be articulated in the plan, and a, you know, implementation schedule for those goals, policies, and actions. So that's what a vision statement is supposed to. It's desired end state. The detailed goals and policies follow that and stick to it. Then, but we did hear that, you know, this is an opportunity to really find, you know, choices in the community, right? And the big choices that we've been talking about and hearing about is regards to the downtown and how do we meet these mandated housing targets, and how do we accommodate this new state legislation, specifically House Bill 1110, also House Bill 1337. So we've tried to accommodate both while we're bringing it out, but if we want to pull back and just kind of do broad-based and use it as outreach and just kind of affirm what our general visions are, we can do that. If we want to pivot and go the other way and get very specific, we can go that way. Right now, it's kind of a hybrid. So, you know, to give us some actionable choices that will, you know, and again, this is not the last bit of input we're going to receive. We don't just do a survey and then write a plan and then make a recommendation. It's more nuanced than that. This kind of is the initial stage, or what, you know, we're maybe, you know, a third of it into the public engagement aspect. And then it's going to be going to looking at different scenarios. What are the trade-offs? What are the benefits? What are the specific choices that you as a body are going to make? And how does the community feel about those few different scenarios that we want to bring back? This kind of sets us up for that. That's the idea.
So let me pose a question to commissioners. What would you say to having this survey have two parts, one that is vision, clearly vision, and one that offers some policy choices? So there's a clear transition, but we do get some clear data about those two particular issues. I see Commissioner Quigg saying yes. Anybody, what are your other feelings? Commissioner Marsh is saying yes. Speak up if you want to have a comment.
I think it's going to still be too complex.
I think that depends on how we write it.
We got so much feedback that this is way too complex.
But that could be the way we wrote it. I think we could present these questions in a much simpler form.
I'd have to see it.
And Aaron
Still in
is
vision
agreeing.
statement format? Still in vision statement format, or are we moving away from that?
Well, it might be two different approaches, but for the policy questions, I think we can definitely simplify them. I don't know. Aaron, what about the vision statements? Can we make those simpler?
We certainly can. I think, you know, we can take out the overall vision and work on that later, and just focus on the different elements. That will certainly shorten it up a bit. And we can, you know, let's go back to, we can try to shorten up a few of the other vision statements, you know, wordsmithing where we can. I think with what I heard loud and clear, and I'm happy to work on this further, is what I heard, one housing option, or, you know, maybe just keep the three housing options but make them distinct and not refer back to the first one. For example, we can certainly do that. Or we can, you know, provide a general vision statement, possibly, and then some specific choices below it. So a more broad-based housing vision, and then some, and I'm just kind of thinking off the cuff here just to try and simplify it, make it easier to digest, maybe some specific choices that all different choices might meet the vision, but they're just different ways to go about it. If you want to, you know, get some really specific detail that can inform that scenario planning.
I can envision something like Commissioner Quigg proposed, where for the housing statements, you have an introductory paragraph that sets out what the requirements are, and then gives
Yes.
us a couple, then has a series of statements and says, to satisfy this, would you prefer this or that? Would you prefer this or that?
And this picture is really helpful. I mean, this picture I thought was brilliant. Whoever designed this picture of the middle housing thing on the cover of the book that
Yes.
the Aaron in the blue jacket gave us. So can you use pictures in the survey? I don't
Well,
know.
there's actually a link in the online survey that does connect you to that
Oh,
if you,
yeah.
there is. Okay, other commissioners
Yeah,
wish to come?
if I may, I thought about putting that graphic actually in the survey. But knowing how people react to surveys, am I voting for this or not? Is kind of what I was worried about that the initial reaction would be. So it was more of a link to, for further information, just like we link to the plan page for further information. Certainly, I appreciate the comment about, laying out what the constraints are, right? What are the constraints with countywide planning policies, with state law requirements, with our housing targets? And I tried to do that. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job. Maybe we can, make that very clear. Maybe use bullet points. Here are the constraints, and just simplify it instead of more prose, paragraph style. So we can certainly work on that. The wording has gotten a little lengthy, and I think it'd be a really good exercise to go back and just make it as concise as possible.
Okay. Any commissioners who haven't commented yet on that question about whether or not that approach, that hybrid approach, is something worth pursuing?
I'll just say I want to see it in writing. I'm not totally sold on it, but seeing's believing. So.
Vice Chair?
I'd have to see it as well, just to understand how it would mesh and how it would flow.
You'll definitely see it, but before we ask Aaron to work on something, I want to make sure he's working in a direction that you are comfortable with him pursuing. Okay, well, I'm seeing either yes or okay. So, Commissioner Dantzler.
I think in order to keep it simple enough, the choices is going to be too much. So I disagree maybe with where it's going.
Do you have so we have one dissenter. Is there a movement building around that? Because right now I'm still hearing that we give.
I'm willing to upset Amy and say I love the idea of choices, but we'll hash it out. We'll hug it out later.
Commissioner Marsh.
I like the idea of exploring that as an option and seeing how it goes with reserving the right to not like it when we see it. If it's not what we think it would, if we don't, well, no, but I mean, it's like, I think it holds promise as a compromise, and I think that I'd like to see it and make sure that it's effective.
I think it hinges on how it's executed and whether it can be done simply.
Sorry.
Senior Planner Fitzgibbons, the other Aaron.
Aaron in blue jacket. Erin. I just have a question, if someone could reiterate. So I understand the vision statements about what the choices would be between? Like what, I mean, we're looking at, and maybe Aaron in Spokane already has this grasp, but I want to be sure that we're, the time that we have, and the length that it takes to do other things for the comprehensive plan, that we do keep moving this forward, right? So is it a choice between, and Aaron, feel free to interrupt me if you want. But is it as simple as what Jim was saying, low rise versus mid rise versus high rise? Or is it concentrate density in the center of the city like we already do? Or what do you see as that choice?
If it were me writing the survey, I wouldn't be able to answer that until I wrote it. And I saw what those words were and I saw if they worked. So I think it's achievable, and I'd like to see Aaron take a first crack at it and then send it to me to see if I can make it better or tell you it's great. And then if you and I have something we're happy with, then bring in a wider group of people that would include one or two other commissioners and some volunteers from the public to look at it and see what they have to say. And the question is whether or not we could do that in time to have something to review at our December 20th meeting.
Can we have another meeting? Can we add another meeting to the calendar, Chairman?
We could, but I think it might take that long to get something, to do all these steps that I just laid out. But I don't know, what do you think, Aaron?
If can try to have, something to you, Charlie, in the next, by next week, I think. Maybe we can, kind of circle back in the next couple days just to kind of digest this and give us another couple days. You have a short week next week, so we have to consider that. And there's multiple other projects. It's like to promise it next week. Now I think about it, but it's might be tough. But certainly, I think we probably could tee it up for another meeting before the 20th if you think that's necessary. And if there's a time that you could find that could accommodate it.
Well, I'm hoping that we don't need another meeting, and the 20th would give us time to do this properly.
Yes.
I mean, we already have this meeting scheduled, so, and if we don't have, whether or not we have any other business on the 20th, right now, we won't have any other business unless there is more conversation about the work plan, which is the topic we're going to take up next. Commissioner Van Atta.
I'm maybe not super positive about this, but I see us on the 20th in the same spot. If Aaron in the green shirt writes a draft and sends it to Charlie, and maybe we all preview it, but I think we'll just be in the same spot, I feel like.
It would get to you before the 20th.
No, but I think we need to sit in a room, in a conference table with a whiteboard and hash this out. Can we do that?
I second that.
I heard that. Is that a thing?
I'll clear my calendar.
I'm in for adding it. I think it's a great idea.
I mean, can we do that?
I like December 6th, 2 days after my wife's birthday, by the way.
Oh, wait, I don't even, we've never done that before, so I don't even know, is that legal? Do we have to make a notice?
There are some notice requirements, and there is some time needed for that, and I'm not sure Erin, it's not her job to know those requirements off the top of her head, so.
Well, it's 15 days. It's 15 days, I do believe.
I just think we need more face-to-face. Email's too slow, and I don't know, it's just quicker to hash stuff out and throw ideas on the, And if we notice it, maybe some of the public shows up even better.
How about December 6th?
I can confirm, so someone needs to make a motion to have the special meeting, I do believe.
I move, we
Wait.
have a,
Right? But I'd still need to confirm the published dates with the clerk, so.
Confirm the published dates with,
The clerk, so if we make a movement, like if we move to have it on the 6th, I believe that will work. There is city council the night before. Just take that for whatever it is. And then, yes, and we do have to have a special meeting notice, so.
I move that, assuming we can comply with the notice requirements, that we have a special meeting of the Newcastle Planning Commission on December 6th at 6 p.m.
do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's unanimously approved. Now that we have a meeting and a deadline, we don't, so Aaron in Spokane, that we don't have to have a final Cook survey, but we need to have something that has gone between you and me once before then. Do you think we can do that?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, Commissioner Kennard, sorry, you were the first one to.
So I just was going to suggest that, Aaron, could you tell us, Aaron with the blue coat, tell us when we would expect to be notified that the 6th works,
Oh,
like
Yeah.
tomorrow?
by tomorrow.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll ask Jane. I
So
do
we'll check
believe
our
that'll-
emails for that.
Yeah, we're still like 3 weeks out from that, so I think we're okay. But it takes a couple days to get something in the paper, is all, so.
If the 6th doesn't work for logistical reasons, is it improper to schedule, as long as we have proper notice, is it improper to schedule something like this outside of the meeting? Outside of this meeting? I mean, can it be done through email, or can a decision be made by Charlie? Is there a
decision?
mechanism for, if the 6th doesn't work, is there a mechanism for setting a different date that doesn't require us having this discussion in a meeting like we're having right now?
I'm not sure.
I would think that the city clerk could email all of us and ask, and suggest some dates, and we could respond. Okay.
I need to read up on my rules.
One more quick on the survey.
Yes.
One more quick on the survey that I would like to, maybe we can discuss it in a future meeting, but I want to get out there. We talked about making information available to the public about some of these more complex and legal issues, things that we're not going to be able to get into in the body of the survey that we think would make it too hard. Is there an opportunity at the beginning of the survey to say, at the end of the survey, there will be a page with links to, materials related to certain topics that are relevant to this? So to the extent that the state of Washington has informational material about these House bills that we've been referencing, can we make that available so it doesn't necessarily clutter up the survey, but it's available on one page at the end? I think that might be useful for everybody.
If you come across some good links, why don't you provide them, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, let's bring, let me just refer to my notes and make sure that I've covered everything on the comp plans before we move on to our next topic. And yes, so there is something else. So we've talked about you making your own recommendations for changes in the element that you're responsible for. We haven't talked officially about how we're going to discuss those, but Mark and I have talked about devoting several of our meetings next year, and I guess I alluded to this earlier, where we get in depth, and as a commission, we discuss one or two elements, and we'd start with the elements that are the biggest topics, probably housing, for example, and move through the rest of them, where all of the commissioners can weigh in and can, but for those meetings, we want to have the survey results for those meetings. We also want to have your recommendations for the change. So they don't need to be done by the December 20th meeting, but they need to be done before we have those. And if you want to meet with a commissioner whose element overlaps yours, you may want to do that. So I guess I'm removing a deadline, which I had talked about being December for those recommendations. It looks like we're going to be starting those conversations later anyway, because the survey is going to take a little while to get out. But just keep that in mind, and probably think of sometime in January is when you'll be making those recommendations, and they should be in writing so that you can share them with the whole commission, because you should send them to everybody. Does that approach make sense in terms of how we address those? I'm talking about the whole process of survey results, commissioners sharing recommendations, commissioners meeting with other commissioners that have an interest in that same element, and then discussing them all together as a commission. Commissioner Nassler.
Oh yeah, just to clarify what you said, are you suggesting that sort of before our meeting comes up, we would meet with any other commissioner who would want input into what we're presenting? Is that?
No, not on what you're presenting. It's just if housing and economic development, if those two elements overlap, and you want to touch base with that commissioner, or like you have touched base with the commissioner on some of your things, just if you feel the need to do that, just do that before we start these meetings, right? Okay. Aaron, do you have enough clarity on how to proceed?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So thank you for being with us tonight and helping us through this. I want to thank our members of the public for being here and sticking with us through this full 2 hours. You're welcome to stay, but we're going to switch now to talk about what our work plan is for 2024. Okay.
Bye, Aaron, thank you.
All right, so Director Hoffman would normally be the one that presents this. All I have to present is really what was in our packet. And the only thing I would add to that is that the section of the work plan that deals with the comprehensive plan, you saw there was a half a dozen topics there. That could be a fluid list depending on what we learn either in the survey or in other public input from workshops of any sort. So it's not meant to be, that work plan could be fluid, especially with the comprehensive plan. One of the items scheduled there is a design review discussion. And the other things are mostly holdovers from 2023 that we didn't get to. What you saw in your packet will be forwarded to the City Council for them to consider. And then we would hear from them on January 2nd when we have a joint meeting with them. And basically they'll tell us whether they like that work plan or whether there's anything else that they need to add to it. So with that, let me just open it up and see if you have any questions, comments, and we'll start with Senior Planner Fitzgibbons.
Thank you. Just an update is that the joint meeting will not be until the 16th.
Oh.
So, and what we're asking you to do tonight is to take a look at this, and if it meets a good start for next year, is to say, yes, this is great, we can take it as is, we'll finish the resolution, and that's great. If not, if there are things you want to add, further discussion to have, we can definitely have that. I do have the resolution up, and I'm happy to take notes and even edit while we're all here. So just wanted to put that in before you get started.
So we could approve it tonight as a recommendation, or if you want to add something to it, we could discuss that tonight, or we could even carry that discussion over to our December 20th meeting. It could be that our meeting on the 6th, if there's no other business and we are able to agree on a survey, that we would not have a meeting on December 20th. We would cancel that meeting.
Yeah. So.
Commissioner Marsh.
Quick question about the community design conversation. I'm trying to remember, Charlie, when we talked about this previously, does this contemplate opening up the downtown plan and us as a body looking at the downtown plan, or is this something that's separate from the downtown plan?
It would be amending the downtown plan.
I believe the idea behind it too was to get a little bit more into architectural regulation, so.
I just like to say I'm the one that wanted it, and I'm thrilled that we can open the downtown plan and talk about making a beautiful city. I'm talking about like flower plant boxes or, beautiful design that, I just want the city to look beautiful when you drive, when you go, the Commons on your left and that godforsaken concrete Del Mar Apartments wall is there. I'm talking about not making mistakes like that as we build, that it's beautiful. So yes, I hope that we can get in the downtown plan as we talk about aesthetics and design standards or ideas, whatever the technical term is.
And it would give you all an opportunity to read the downtown plan, where you'll find that you'll be surprised at the design standards that are already there. Commissioner Vanetta.
As soon as you say architectural design, it screams a lot of time. Do we have time for that next year?
We're not, the way this is written, it's a discussion. We're not committing to any action, we're not committing to any changes, we're putting it out as a discussion.
That makes
And I'm not sure what the implications of that are, but I would think that part of it is going to be some education by staff about what the implications are of having design standards. What does that mean? How do you administer them? How do you enforce them? It's to educate us about.
Okay.
And maybe we would see some examples of cities that are like ours and how they did it. So it's really more.
But we won't be recommending something to the city council.
Well, no, it could be.
Oh, you think it could get that far? Okay.
I mean, it depends on.
What it is.
Yeah, what we learn.
Okay.
But I think we're just committing to learn about it at this point.
Okay. Fair enough.
Commissioner Dantzler.
I would assume that that would involve an added scope for a consultant, a professional firm. Is that correct? Or do others share that assumption?
To do what?
If we're going to be talking about our design standards, we would want, Jim Quigg wouldn't decide the design standards of Newcastle. It would be, a professional firm. Like SCJ was hired basically to help with our last downtown plan, right? So I'm just trying to understand, is this just a conversation like the seven of us thinking about, would we hire a firm to present some revised standards? But that would be a cost.
I'll answer that question if Vice Chair Kennard doesn't address it in his comment.
I think the conversation is more like what would not what our standards would look like, but what kind of level of decision-making do we want to have about any standards that we come up with? Do we want to have an architectural review board? Or do we want to have standards that staff can just review and check a box on? And what are other cities of our size doing relative to that? I think that's my sense of what the discussion is.
Maybe some options would involve hiring a firm and others would not? Is that fair?
Commissioner Quigg?
My hope and prayer is that we don't have to spend money to do this. I don't know what it's costing. I'm guessing it's $100,000, $150,000 for the consultation. Probably somebody's better know that number, but I don't want to spend another $150,000 on that. I would just like for our city to be beautiful, please. And so I'm just saying, can we just talk about how that works in other cities? Because I drive through some cities and they're gorgeous and it's like this consistent look and feel, and Newcastle is just not there yet. And so like Brian said, I don't think we're going to figure it all out immediately, but I would just like to kind of broach that topic. So I hope we don't have to spend any money to do it.
So I don't think we would spend any money. I mean, first of all, we can't spend any money. Only the council can spend money. I think the expectation that I would have for what we would do next year is that we would become educated about it. Having been educated about it, we would think whether or not we're really serious about this is something that we want Newcastle to do, and we would make a recommendation to the council that they would do something that would cost money in order to take it to the next step. And I think in terms of the amount of education that we would get, it will depend on how much staff time is available to do that, because there is not a lot of discretionary time in their schedule. Senior Planner Fitzgibbons.
I was going to add that it may be a good time to have the conversation and even be able to make some small, if we can identify some small changes, because we're going to be having to update our development code anyway to meet the House bills, the critical areas, everything that's going to be under the comp plan. So it may actually work very well to be having some conversation, even if we don't end up with Santa Barbara or, something, Gig Harbor.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion that we proceed with the comp plan as it is outlined in this resolution?
Aaron, would you scroll up? No, I just need to read the title. I move to recommend for City Council adoption of draft resolution 2024-963, Planning Commission 2024 Work Plan as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Well, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. All right, we've already talked about our planning calendar, but I will just recap it. We have now a special meeting that we expect to be held on December 6th. We have a regular meeting that is currently scheduled for December 20th, which may or may not occur depending on our success in approving a survey on the 6th. And we have a joint meeting with the City Council on January 16th. And then we have our regular meeting on the fourth Wednesday of January, which I don't know what that date is.
The 23rd is the 4th.
23rd.
Yeah. Oh, that's a Tuesday. I'm sorry. I'm on the City Council calendar. 24th.
All right. I want to thank all of the commissioners for their insights and their energy and their patience. And I want to thank the people who joined us from the public tonight for their contributions in helping us come up with a better survey. And with that, we'll adjourn this meeting.
What time is the City Council?
I don't know, probably 7 o'clock, but it may be an earlier meeting.
I'll put it as all day.
Do you know the starting time of the joint meeting?